Commander Velix stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the small blue planet grow larger on the view screen. In his 300 years of service to the Galactic Concordance, he had done the same thing 47 times before. Each time, the primitive species below had seen his fleet and made the smart choice. They surrendered, accepted Concordance law, and joined the galaxy as client members. It was always the same. The humans would be no different, he thought. His sensors showed their technology was at least 2 centuries behind Concordance standard. They had barely reached their own moon when his scout ships first spotted them. Now, 5 years later, they had a few stations in orbit and some clumsy vessels that could barely maintain stable fusion drives. They were children playing with fire, and he was here to make sure they didn't burn themselves. Velix opened a communication channel that would reach every radio, television, and computer on the planet below. His translator device would convert his words into their primitive languages. He had given this speech so many times he could recite it in his sleep. People of Earth, I am Commander Velix of the Galactic Concordance Fleet. We have observed your species for some time now. You have reached the stars, and this is an achievement worth celebrating. However, you are not alone in this galaxy. There are rules here, laws that all civilized beings must follow. We offer you a choice. Join us peacefully, accept our guidance, and your species will prosper. Refuse, and we will be forced to bring you into compliance by other means. You have 1 planetary rotation to decide. The transmission ended. Velix settled into his command chair and waited. They always needed time to panic first, to argue among themselves, to realize they had no real choice. By tomorrow, their leaders would be begging to negotiate terms. 6 hours later, a small human vessel approached his fleet. It was a cargo ship, barely worthy of the name spacecraft. The humans were probably sending diplomats, ready to discuss surrender. Velix almost smiled. 6 hours was actually quite fast. These humans were smart enough to know when they were beaten. Sir, the human vessel is not responding to our hails, his communications officer reported. Perhaps their equipment is malfunctioning, Velix said. Allow it to approach. Scan it for weapons. No weapons detected, sir. It appears to be a standard cargo configuration. The ship drifted closer. It was ugly by Concordance standards, all rough angles and exposed piping. The humans clearly had much to learn about proper engineering. When it was within 500 meters of his flagship, Velix finally grew suspicious. Why isn't it slowing down? He asked. His tactical officer's face went pale. Sir, I'm detecting a massive energy buildup inside that vessel. It's not a cargo ship. It's a bomb. Velix barely had time to shout an order before the human ship exploded. The force of the blast tore through his flagship's shields and ripped open the forward hull. Alarms screamed throughout the bridge as atmosphere vented into space. Emergency systems kicked in, sealing bulkheads and redirecting power, but the damage was done. His beautiful flagship, pride of the Concordance fleet, was crippled by a primitive explosive device. Return fire! Velix screamed. Target their planet. But there was nothing to target. Earth had gone completely silent. No radio signals, no transmissions, nothing. It was as if the entire planet had simply turned off every device that could send a signal. Velix's second officer, Commander Thrain, spoke urgently. Sir, we should retreat and call for reinforcements. This was clearly a trap. Retreat? Velix felt his pride burning. From these primitives? Transfer my command to the Daybreak. We're going to orbit and show them what happens when you attack the Concordance. Against Thrain's advice, Velix ordered the fleet to advance to Earth. His remaining 11 ships moved into orbit, weapons ready to bombard military installations, and show these humans the price of defiance. That's when the chaos began. The space around Earth was full of debris. Satellites, spent rocket stages, and various pieces of human junk orbited the planet in a shell of metal. Velix's ships avoided the larger pieces easily, but then something strange happened. The debris started moving. Not drifting, but actively changing course, accelerating toward his ships. "They've weaponized their orbital junk," Thrain shouted. "Evasive action." But there was too much of it. Hundreds of objects, some no larger than a person, others the size of small buildings, all converging on the Concordance fleet. They struck shields and hulls with devastating kinetic force. One ship lost its engines when a satellite core punched through its reactor housing. Another took dozens of smaller impacts that shredded its communications array. Then the small craft appeared. Hundreds of them, pouring out from hidden locations on the dark side of the moon, from behind orbital stations, from within the debris field itself. They were tiny things, barely large enough for one or two people, but they moved fast and erratically. More importantly, they weren't trying to fight. They were trying to ram. Velix watched in horror as a human craft accelerated directly toward the daybreak. His weapons officer fired, vaporizing it instantly, but three more appeared to take its place. They came in swarms, like insects attacking a much larger predator. His ships destroyed dozens, then hundreds, but the humans kept coming. One craft made it through. The pilot, visible in the cockpit through the canopy, looked directly at Velix's camera as he rammed into the Daybreak's starboard weapon array. The explosion was small but precise. The entire weapon system went offline. "They're targeting our critical systems," Thrain yelled. "They know exactly where to hit." More human craft broke through. Some exploded against shields, accomplishing nothing except perhaps buying time for others. Some released clouds of something that stuck to Concordance hulls and began eating through the armor. Others fired crude missiles that shouldn't have been able to penetrate. Military-grade shielding, but somehow found weak points and gaps. The Concordance ships tried to maintain formation, tried to fight with discipline and coordination, but the humans made that impossible. There was no front line, no organized attack. It was pure chaos. Attacks came from every direction, from opponents who seemed to have no regard for their own survival. After 6 hours of constant assault, Velix had lost 9 ships, 9, against an enemy that shouldn't have been able to scratch his paint. The 2 remaining vessels, including his crippled flagship being towed by the Daybreak, barely escaped Earth's gravity well done as they retreated. A final transmission came from the planet. It was simple, just text in the Concordance's own language. "Leave and don't come back. This is your only warning." Velix stared at those words for a long time. In 300 years, he had never retreated from a primitive world. He had never lost 9 ships to an enemy that didn't even have proper warships. And he had never ever been given a warning by a species that should have been begging for mercy. The report he would have to give to the High Council made him feel sick. But one thing was certain now. These humans were not like the other species. They didn't fight with honor or follow any rules he understood. They fought like the universe itself owed them something, and they were willing to die taking it. Commander Thrain approached quietly. "Sir, what do we tell the Council?" Velix kept staring at that message on his screen. "Tell them the truth. Tell them we just met a species that turns death into a weapon. And tell them to send everything we have, because if we don't crush them now, they're going to be a problem we can't contain." The Daybreak jumped to faster than light speed, leaving Earth behind. Down on that blue planet, humans were already preparing for what they knew would come next. They had bought themselves time, but they understood something the Concordance was only beginning to learn. When your enemy is stronger, you don't fight fair. You fight to survive. And humans had been surviving against impossible odds since they first crawled out of caves and faced down. Predators with nothing but rocks and determination. The war had just begun. And the galaxy was about to learn what humans did best: refuse to quit, no matter the cost. High Magistrate Theron listened to Commander Velix's report with growing disbelief. A primitive species had destroyed 9 Concordance warships. 9. The number seemed impossible. More ships had been lost in this single encounter than in the last 50 years of Concordance expansion combined. You were ambushed by debris and small craft. Theron's voice carried the weight of centuries of authority. And you retreated? Velix stood at attention, his uniform still stained from the emergency repairs his crew had performed. High Magistrate, these humans do not fight like any species we've encountered. They have no regard for their own lives. They weaponize everything, including themselves. We need a full battle fleet to... Enough. Theron raised one long hand. Your failure is noted. However, you are correct about one thing. We cannot let this insult stand. The entire galaxy is watching. If we appear weak, if we allow one primitive world to defy us, every client species will begin to question Concordance authority. Theron turned to his council. Prepare a battle fleet. 200 ships. We will meet these humans in open combat and show them the full might of civilization. Send them the formal challenge. We will face them at the coordinates of their choosing, and we will crush them according to the ancient laws of warfare. 3 weeks later, the largest Concordance fleet assembled in a generation emerged from faster-than-light travel at the designated coordinates. 200 warships, arranged in perfect formation, awaited the human response. Each ship was positioned according to doctrine that had been refined over thousands of years. Each captain knew their role. This was how civilized species conducted warfare. With honor and structure, Theron stood on his command ship, the Eternal Harmony, and broadcast the challenge to the human fleet that was just appearing on sensors. People of Earth, you have shown courage in standing against us. We respect this. Therefore, we offer you the honor of traditional combat. Our ships will pair with yours. Each battle will continue until one side surrenders or is disabled. The side with the most victories claims overall triumph. These are the rules followed by all civilized. The human weapons fired before he could finish speaking. Massive projectiles. Simple chunks of metal accelerated to incredible speeds. Tore through space from distances that conventional weapons shouldn't be able to reach. 3 Concordant ships took hits before anyone could react. Shields held, but the impact sent ships tumbling out of formation. They're firing from extreme range. Theron's tactical officer shouted. And they're not in formation at all. Indeed, the human fleet was a mess. Military vessels mixed with what appeared to be civilian craft, mining ships, and even what looked like luxury yachts that someone had welded weapons onto. There was no organization, no clear command structure. They moved independently, each ship doing whatever it wanted. Return fire, Theron commanded. All ships, engage your designated targets. But the humans refused to pair off. They swarmed instead. 3 or 4 ships attacking a single Concordance vessel while ignoring others entirely. They showed no interest in honorable single combat. When Concordant ships moved to establish proper engagement range, the humans either rushed in too close for heavy weapons to track or stayed far back and launched those crude railgun projectiles. One of the civilian craft, a mining barge, accelerated directly toward a Concordance cruiser. The cruiser's captain hesitated, bound by laws that protected civilian vessels in combat. That hesitation lasted 3 seconds. Then the mining barge detonated with enough force to crack the cruiser's spine in half. They're using civilian ships as bombs. Someone screamed over the command channel. More civilian craft charged forward. Some exploded. Others released clouds of something that ate through shields like acid. A luxury yacht fired what appeared to be nuclear missiles. primitive fission weapons that concordant species had banned centuries ago as too crude and dangerous. Theron watched his perfect formation dissolve into chaos. Human ships weren't fighting battles. They were creating disasters. They released debris fields that disrupted sensors. They broadcast surrender signals and then fired on ships that approached to accept. They targeted medical vessels and supply ships, things that were supposed to be protected by the rules of warfare. Admiral Chun to all human vessels. A transmission crackled across all frequencies. Remember the plan. Make it hurt. Make it cost them everything. And if you're going down, take 10 of them with you. A chill ran down Theron's spine. These humans were fighting like every battle was their last. Like defeat meant extinction. The desperation in that admiral's voice spoke of a species that had nothing left to lose and everything to prove. A cluster of human ships broke through the concordance line. They were small, fast, and loaded with explosives. 6 of them reached their targets. 6 concordance destroyers vanished in a chain of explosions, torn apart by enemies willing to die to kill them. This is madness, Theron's second-in-command said. They're not even trying to survive. But that wasn't quite true. The humans were trying to survive. They just understood something the concordants had forgotten during millennia of rule-bound warfare. Sometimes survival meant being willing to die. Sometimes winning meant being more brutal than your enemy could stomach. A message came through on Theron's personal channel. It was Admiral Chun herself, a human woman with dark eyes and a face that showed no fear. High Magistrate Theron, you wanted traditional combat. You wanted honor and rules. But here's the thing about rules. They only work when both sides agree to them. We never agreed. We're fighting to survive. And we'll use every weapon we have, including the ones you're too civilized to consider. The communication cut off. Immediately after, a wing of human fighters swarmed past the Eternal Harmony's defenses. They were so small and moved so erratically the targeting system struggled to lock on. One made it through. Just one. But that was enough. The fighter crashed into the Eternal Harmony's communications array. The pilot had probably died instantly, Theron thought. Died to knock out one system on one ship. The waste of it, the brutality of it, was incomprehensible. Except it worked. Without communications, Theron couldn't coordinate his fleet effectively. Captains made their own decisions, trying to follow doctrine while fighting an enemy that respected no doctrine at all. The perfect formation became a scattered mess of individual battles, which was exactly what the humans wanted. The battle raged for 8 hours. Concordant ships were superior in every technical measure. Better shields, better weapons, better armor. But the humans compensated with tactics that would have been considered war crimes by every other spacefaring species. They used chemical weapons that melted through hulls. They deployed drones loaded with radioactive material. They showed footage of their own crew members, men and women, and even children, on civilian ships that they then rammed into concordant vessels. By the time Theron restored communications and called for a retreat, 87 concordant ships had been destroyed or crippled beyond repair. The human fleet was in even worse shape, with less than 60 ships still functional. But they had achieved their goal. They had made the concordants pay a price so high that even victory tasted like Ashdod as the concordance fleet withdrew. Theron received one final message from Admiral Chun. It was a video. She sat in what looked like a damaged bridge, smoke visible in the background, but her eyes were clear and hard. You wanted to teach us our place in your galaxy, she said. But we already know our place. We're the species that survived ice ages, plagues, world wars, and countless disasters on our own planet. We're the ones who learned to fight dirty because clean fighting gets you killed. You call us brutal. We call it determined. You think you can break us by destroying our ships? Every ship you kill makes the rest of us more resolved. Every person we lose is a reason to fight harder. She leaned closer to the camera. You want to conquer us? Fine, but understand what that means. It means every planet will be a trap. Every colony will resist. Every human you meet might be the one who decides to take you with them when they go. We don't have your technology or your numbers. What we have is the absolute refusal to accept defeat. And that's worth more than all your fancy ships and rules. The transmission ended. Darren sat in silence for a long time. Around him, his crew worked to assess damage and count the dead. 87 ships. Thousands of lives. And the humans had suffered even more, yet they acted like they had won. Perhaps they had, Darren realized. They had proven that the Concordance could be hurt. They had shown the entire galaxy that humanity would rather die fighting than live under someone else's rules. And most terrifying of all, they had forced the Concordance to fight on human terms, to abandon doctrine and honor, just to survive the encounter. Sir, his tactical officer said quietly, what do we do now? Darren looked at the tactical display, showing the human ships retreating toward their inner colonies. Those ships were damaged, barely holding together, crewed by people who had just survived a nightmare. But they were already regrouping, already preparing for the next fight. We adapt, Theron said finally. We learn to fight like they do, or we die. Send a message to all fleet commanders. The rules of civilized warfare are suspended when fighting humans. Do whatever it takes to win. The war changed everything. What started as a simple conquest became a nightmare that stretched across 5 years and dozens of star systems. The Concordance learned to fight dirty, abandoning centuries of civilized warfare doctrine. They had no choice. Fighting humans by the old rules was suicide, but even as they adapted, the humans stayed one step ahead. They didn't defend their colonies the way the Concordance expected. When Concordant forces approached a human world, they found the population evacuated and the infrastructure rigged to explode. Entire cities became traps. Power plants became bombs. Water treatment facilities released chemical weapons into the air. Captain Riloth of the Concordance. Marines learned this the hard way on. The colony world of New Perth, his unit had taken the capital city without firing a shot. The humans were gone, leaving only empty buildings and silent streets. For 3 days, his soldiers patrolled the city, confused by the lack of resistance. On the 4th day, the city started killing them. It began with a warehouse explosion that leveled an entire district. Then, the automated factories activated, producing not goods but clouds of toxic gas. The power grid, which they had foolishly restarted, overloaded and set off a cascade of electrical fires. Underground tunnels that no one knew existed opened up, and small groups of humans emerged to attack supply depots before disappearing again. Riloth lost 1/3 of his force in 2 weeks. Not to an army, but to a city that had been weaponized. When reinforcements finally arrived to evacuate his survivors, he filed a report that read like a horror story. The humans had turned their own colony into a weapon and sacrificed it just to kill Concordant soldiers. Similar stories came from every occupied world. On New Shanghai, the humans had poisoned the water supply before leaving. On Kepler Station, they left behind maintenance robots reprogrammed to sabotage Concordance equipment. On Tau Ceti Prime, they released genetically modified insects that carried diseases specifically engineered to affect Concordance biology. The humans fought with no rules and no mercy. But more than that, they fought with patience. They didn't need to win battles. They just needed to make occupation so costly that the Concordance would eventually give up. High Magistrate Darren understood the strategy. It was brilliant in its simplicity. Every world the Concordance took required resources to hold. Resources that could have been used elsewhere. The humans were bleeding the Concordance slowly, world by world, ambush by ambush. But Theron had a plan to end it. Intelligence reports indicated a major human fleet was trapped at Proxima Station, caught between Concordance forces and a gravitational anomaly that made faster-than-light travel impossible. 300 Concordance warships surrounded the station. Inside were 40 human vessels and perhaps 50,000 civilians. Theron had them. Finally, after years of chasing shadows and fighting ghosts, he had the humans cornered. He traveled to the battle site himself, determined to witness humanity surrender personally. This would be the turning point. This would show the galaxy that the Concordance still ruled. Admiral Kira Okonkwo commanded the trapped human fleet. Theron had studied her file extensively. She was 53 years old, a career military officer who had fought in human conflicts before the Concordance arrived. She had a reputation for unconventional tactics and, according to some reports, absolutely no fear of death. Theron opened the communication channel. Admiral Okonkwo, your situation is hopeless. You cannot escape, and you cannot win. I am offering you terms of surrender. Your civilians will be spared and relocated to safe worlds under Concordance protection. Your military personnel will be treated as prisoners of war. This is more generous than you deserve after what your species has done, but I am trying to end this bloodshed. The response came quickly. Okonkwo's face appeared on screen. She looked tired. Theron thought. 5 years of war had aged her, but her eyes still held that hard determination he had come to associate with humans. Magistrate, I appreciate the offer. I really do. But here's the problem. If we surrender, you'll use us as propaganda. You'll parade us around, show the galaxy that humanity can be beaten, and use that to break our people's spirit. Every human watching will see us give up, and some of them might start thinking surrender is an option. Theron nodded slowly. And you cannot allow that. No, I can't. Okonkwo smiled, that there was no humor in it. See, you still don't understand us. We're not fighting for territory or resources or even our pride. We're fighting for the right to exist on our own terms. And if we can't have that, if we have to choose between slavery and death, we'll pick death every single time. Because at least death is ours. At least death is a choice we make. Then, you're condemning your civilians to die along with you, Theron said. Thousands of innocent people. They know what they signed up for when they chose to stay. Okonkwo's voice hardened. Every person on these ships had the option to evacuate. They stayed because they believe in what we're fighting for. Now, I suggest you back your ships up, because things are about to get messy. The channel closed. Theron immediately ordered his fleet to battle stations. He had learned not to underestimate human threats. Whatever was about to happen, it would be unconventional and probably horrific. The humans launched everything. Every escape pod, every shuttle, every piece of debris they could fit a propulsion unit onto. Thousands of objects streamed out from Proxima Station, each on a different trajectory, each heading toward Concordance ships at varying speeds. Theron's tactical officer tried to prioritize targets. Sir, there are too many. We can't track them all. Some are definitely decoys, but we can't tell which ones. Fire on anything that gets close, Theron ordered. Assume they're all hostile. The Concordance fleet opened fire. Point defense systems lit up space, destroying hundreds of objects. But there were too many, and the humans had planned for this. Mixed in with the decoys were actual threats. Some escape pods contained humans in spacesuits, armed with plasma torches and explosives. When these pods got close enough to Concordance ships, the hatches blew open and the humans used their suit thrusters to reach the hose. One such team landed on the destroyer, Righteous Flame. 4 humans in armored suits, each carrying enough explosives to breach a ship's armor. The Righteous Flames crew tried to stop them, sending security teams to the hull, but it was too late. The humans cut through, placed their charges at critical points, and detonated them. The destroyer's reactor containment failed. The ship exploded, taking the human saboteurs with it. This scene repeated across the Concordance fleet. Not every human team succeeded, but enough did. 20 ships took critical damage from boarding actions. Another 15 were damaged by genuine attack craft hiding among the decoys. But the worst part, the part that truly horrified Theron, was the civilians. The humans had loaded escape pods with actual civilians, including families with children, and launched them at the Concordance fleet. By the laws of warfare, by every standard of civilized behavior, these pods could not be fired upon, except some of them were bombs. Theron watched in horror as his captains tried to sort genuine civilian pods from disguised weapons. They couldn't fire on the civilians, but if they let the wrong pod through, it could destroy their ship. The psychological torture of that choice was deliberate. The humans were forcing Concordance officers to make impossible decisions, knowing that whatever they chose would haunt them in the chaos. While Concordance forces scrambled to deal with thousands of objects and difficult choices, the human fleet made its move. They overloaded their reactor cores, pushing them beyond safe limits, beyond what ship designers ever intended. The risk was enormous. Any one of those ships could have suffered a catastrophic failure and exploded, but they didn't. 40 human vessels, glowing from the heat of their overworked engines, punched through the Concordance blockade at speeds that should have torn them apart. The gravitational anomaly that had trapped them became a slingshot, hurling them past Concordance forces too fast to intercept. 16 ships made it through intact. 24 were destroyed in the attempt, along with thousands of crew members and civilians who had known the odds and tried anyway. But 16 ships survived when 0 should have. They escaped an impossible trap through sheer audacity and the willingness to accept horrific casualties. The Concordance lost 93 ships in the chaos. Some to human sabotage, some to collisions with debris, some to friendly fire when confused captains shot at the wrong targets. It was the worst military disaster in Concordance history. Theron stared at the aftermath on his tactical display. Debris fields, expanding gas clouds, and the fading signatures of those 16 human ships jumping to faster-than-light speed. They had won. Against all odds, against all logic, the humans had won. The final communication came from Admiral Okonkwo, transmitted from one of the surviving ships. "Hi, Magistrate. You asked why we don't surrender. I think you understand now. We don't surrender because we can't. It's not in us. Every human learns from childhood that sometimes you fight even when you can't win, because the fight itself matters. We're not like you. We didn't conquer our world through civilization and order. We survived it through stubbornness and violence and refusing to quit even when everything said we should." 5 years. That's how long the war had lasted when the final confrontation came to Terra Nova. 5 years of brutal fighting, of victories that felt like defeats and defeats that somehow strengthened human resolve. The Concordance controlled more territory than ever, but they had become something they despised in the process. They ambushed. They used unconventional weapons. They ignored the old rules of warfare. They had learned to fight like humans, and it had cost them their identity. High Magistrate Theron stood on the bridge of his flagship, looking at the tactical display. Terra Nova, humanity's largest remaining colony, was marked in red. Around it, 1,000 Concordance warships waited information. Half the entire Concordance fleet gathered for one final, decisive battle. Intelligence indicated the humans had been building something in secret, asteroid bases and hidden shipyards throughout the war. Resources that should have gone to defense had instead vanished into classified military projects. Theron's scouts reported increased activity near Terra Nova. Whatever the humans had built, it was there. "This ends today," Theron said to his command staff. "No more half measures. No more occupation duty. We burn their fleet, we take Terra Nova, and we show every human world what happens to those who resist. We will break their spirit once and for all." His officers nodded, but Theron could see doubt in their eyes. They had all heard similar declarations before. They had all watched confident predictions turn into nightmares. 5 years of fighting humans had taught them to expect the unexpected. The human fleet emerged from behind Terra Nova's moon. 300 ships, larger than any human vessel seen before. These weren't converted civilian craft or cobbled-together warships. These were purpose-built dreadnoughts, constructed from scratch during 5 years of war. Every line of their hulls spoke of lessons learned in blood. Every weapon system had been designed by people who knew exactly what they were fighting against. Admiral Kira Okonkwo's face appeared on Theron's communication screen. She looked older than their last meeting at Proxima Station, her hair now streaked with gray, her face lined with exhaustion. But her eyes still held that unbreakable human determination. "High Magistrate Theron, you brought quite a fleet." "Admiral Okonkwo, I see you've been busy." Theron studied the human dreadnoughts on his display. "Those are impressive ships, but you're still outnumbered 3-1. This doesn't have to end in slaughter. Surrender now, and I can promise your civilians will be treated well." Okonkwo laughed, but it was a tired sound. "You know I can't do that." "Neither can you. We've both come too far, lost too much. This war ends when one of us can't fight anymore. So let's stop pretending there's another option. So be it." Theron closed the channel and turned to his fleet commanders. "All ships, engage. Show them what happens when they refuse peace." The Concordance fleet moved forward in perfect formation, weapons charging. They had the numbers. They had the experience. They had adapted to human tactics over 5 years of warfare. This should have been their victory. The humans didn't charge recklessly like they used to. They didn't scatter in chaos or launch suicide attacks. Instead, they moved with practiced coordination, each dreadnought supporting the others, creating overlapping fields of fire. They had learned, too. 5 years of fighting the galaxy's premier military had taught them strategy, tactics, and discipline. The battle began at extreme range, both sides testing each other with long-distance weapons. The humans had refined their railguns, making them more accurate and more powerful. Concordant shields held, but ships took damage that would have been unthinkable 5 years ago. As the fleets closed, the humans revealed their new tactics. They weren't fighting fair, but they weren't fighting chaotically either. They had taken everything that made them dangerous and refined it into something more effective. They still used swarm tactics, but now with purpose. They still targeted critical systems, but now with precision. They still showed no fear of death, but now they made sure their deaths accomplished strategic goals. A wing of human strike craft broke through Concordance lines and attacked supply ships at the rear. Not out of desperation, but because they had identified the supply chain as a weakness. Concordance forces had to divert defensive ships, weakening the front line. The humans exploited that weakness immediately, punching through with 3 dreadnoughts and causing chaos in the Concordance formation. Theron watched his perfect battle plan fall apart. The humans weren't better warriors. They weren't more advanced. But they fought with a flexibility the Concordance doctrine couldn't match. Every Concordance captain knew their role and followed orders. Every human captain seemed to know exactly what needed to happen and made it happen without being told. Hours passed. The battle raged across cubic kilometers of space. Ships on both sides were destroyed, damaged, or disabled. But slowly, inevitably, the Concordance numbers began to tell. 300 human ships against 1,000 was always going to be a losing fight, no matter how well the humans performed. Theron saw victory approaching. The humans were being pushed back. Their losses were mounting. Admiral Okonkwo's flagship was damaged, leaking atmosphere. This was the moment. This was when they would break. But they didn't break. A damaged human dreadnought, its hull breached and engines failing, used its last power to ram a Concordance battleship. Both ships died in the explosion, but the wreckage took out 3 more Concordance vessels nearby. That single act of defiance seemed to inspire the entire human fleet. Damaged ships that should have retreated instead charged forward, trading their lives for damage to the enemy. "They're doing it again," Theron's tactical officer said with something like awe in his voice. "They're turning death into a weapon." But this time was different. This wasn't chaos or desperation. This was calculated sacrifice. Each human ship that died took multiple Concordance vessels with it. They aimed for critical targets, command ships, carriers, anything that would hurt the Concordance most. Theron realized with growing horror that the humans weren't trying to win through normal means. They were trying to make victory so costly that it wouldn't matter. They were trying to break the Concordances while more hours passed. The Concordance was winning by every measure. They had destroyed over 200 human ships, but they had lost 300 of their own. 300 against 200. Those were terrible odds, worse than anything the Concordance had experienced in centuries of warfare. Admiral Okonkwo's voice came across all channels, broadcast so every ship on both sides could hear. "All human vessels, this is Admiral Okonkwo. I want you to know something. Every single one of you has made your ancestors proud. You've shown this galaxy what humanity stands for. We stand for each other. We stand for our right to choose our own path. And we stand even when it would be easier to fall." She paused, and Theron could hear explosions on her bridge. "But mostly, we stand because we're too stubborn to do anything else. So let's show them one more time. Let's show them that humans don't quit." The remaining human ships regrouped. Less than 100 now, facing over 600 Concordance vessels. They should have surrendered. Any rational species would have surrendered. Instead, they charged. Theron wanted to turn away, but he couldn't. He watched as humans threw themselves at his fleet with everything they had left. They used every trick, every tactic, every dirty maneuver they had learned. They mined their own retreat paths so Concordance ships couldn't pursue safely. They broadcast false surrender signals and then attacked ships that approached. They released clouds of debris that disrupted sensors. They fought like the universe itself owed them something, and they were going to collect or die trying. By the time the battle ended, the Concordance had won. Fewer than 20 human ships escaped. Terra Nova was theirs for the taking. But the cost was staggering. 438 Concordance ships destroyed or too damaged to continue. Nearly half the fleet gone. Tens of thousands of crew members dead. Resources that would take decades to replace, expended in one battle. Theron sat in his command chair, surrounded by damage reports and casualty lists. He had won the battle. He had broken the human fleet. Terra Nova was defenseless. By every military measure, this was victory, but it felt like defeat. Admiral Okonkwo's ship had been destroyed in the final minutes of battle. Theron had watched it explode, taking a Concordance carrier with it. The woman who had fought him for 5 years was gone. Dead because she refused to surrender, because surrendering wasn't in human nature. Theron thought about what that meant. If Okonkwo, one of humanity's best military minds, would rather die than surrender, what did that say about the rest of humanity? How many more battles like this would it take to truly defeat them? How many more Concordance ships would be lost? How many more years of warfare? And even if they won, Even if they occupied every human world and killed every human soldier, what then? The humans would resist. They would sabotage. They would fight guerrilla wars for generations. They had already proven they would weaponize their own colonies, sacrifice their own people, do whatever it took to make occupation unsustainable. For the first time in 5 years, Theron admitted to himself what he had refused to see. The Concordance couldn't win this war. Not really.